Welcome to Neighbor Talk. I'm Jeff Warren, Dr. Jeff Warren, Memphis City Council member, District 9-3, Super District 9-3. And I'm here with my good friend, Justin J. Pearson, who is responsible for, I think, a lot of good work that we've had here recently in Memphis, trying to protect our aquifer. I don't know how closely you've been following this, but we just like to give you a little bit of historical background about where we started, why we started, and how we got to where we are today and where we hope to be in the future. As you know, the aquifer is a source of incredible, safe and pure drinking water that we've been blessed with here in Memphis. And any particular damage to that would hurt our city immeasurably. So as a council member, I got an email about a year ago telling me about a rally that was being held down at Mitchell High School by a young man, my buddy now, Justin J. Pearson, trying to stop a pipeline from pushing high pressure oil through South Memphis, through a historically African-American community, and across our aquifer. So I went to this pipeline meeting, and that's where I met Justin, my friend. And Justin, I'd like you to sort of give some information before that, because I know I came in after you'd already been working.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on Neighbor Talk, and thank you for being a champion of the aquifer, a champion of environmental justice. I can 100% assure anyone that hears this that we would not be in the position we are, where we did defeat the project and where we are actually pushing legislation, have passed legislation in the city and in the county without Councilman Dr. Jeff Warren's effort as a champion of this work. But to the point, before January, when we first met, this crude oil pipeline company, it was Valero Energy Corporation, Plains All American, two multi-billion-dollar corporations decided they were going to move oil from Oklahoma down through Memphis and Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. And they come into the city, they begin spending money, $1 million, I think, philanthropically. They had been using law of eminent domain to actually get the rights to people's land. And what happened in February, actually, of 2020, they went to Boxtown, which is a historically African-American community built by formerly enslaved people in the 1860s after the Civil War. And it's a freedmen's community in our own city. And they went to the church there, and they called the people in the community the path of least resistance when asked why they chose this neighborhood. Now, I'm from Southwest Memphis, from Westwood, which you know, and I can assure you, my grandmama's there, my 5 uncles and aunts, 6 uncles on the other side. There is nothing least resistant about the folks in South Memphis and not in Southwest Memphis particularly. But that phrase was important because it became a rallying cry for the work that needed to happen. Because when they were calling it the path of least resistance, what they were really, in a sociological way, saying was it's a place that has been deprived economically. It's a place that has been deprived socially. It's a place that's been deprived politically of power for a really long time. Because the community, unfortunately, you know this, Doc, has been ignored a lot. And when we think about health, when we think about public health, when we think about environment and environmental justice, the cancer risk in Southwest Memphis is 4 times the national average, right? There are 17 toxic release inventory facilities there. And so you look at that, and this company did, and they were like, this is the path that we can go, and there won't be resistance. But they met Boxtown and Westwood, and they had a huge community meeting, exactly like you said, about a year ago, where we really learned more about the project and the dangers. And the significant one to the entire city was this aquifer. And Dr. Warren and I think we've learned more about Memphis's water than ever thought we probably would. And God bless Protect Our Aquifer, our great coalition partner, who really has helped to educate us. But Memphis has some of the best drinking water in the world because our water comes from nearly it's 2,000 years ago. The rainwater is now the water that we drink.
It's been filtered incredibly deep. Okay, there's water above our aquifer.
Exactly, in the shallow.
Through to get to the aquifer, to get to that pure water.
And so the purification process is extraordinary, which is why we don't have to have a lot of different chemicals in our drinking water. But if you go to other places, and I know you travel a bit as well, like if you drink the water out of the faucet, like it will not taste as good. It can assure you. And so we realized that this pipeline was being planned to go atop the aquifer, and even in Mississippi, it was going over the recharge area, which provides us the rainwater that'll eventually be filtered down into the aquifer. And it was going through Boxtown and Westwood, these Black communities. They were taking land from Black folks who had their land in the 1930s and 40s, really when Black folks couldn't own land in the ways that we have a little bit more access to do now. And so we did. We started rallying and just picking up the phone. Councilman Ford, Councilman Warren, Congressman Cohen. We started reaching out to people and saying, we don't know exactly what's happening, but we need to fight, right? We need support in that fight. And in January, the rally we held at Mitchell High School, the week before, I sent an email, and at 12 o'clock a.m., Councilman Warren responded. It was like, tell me more, right? And I was up and I was responding back like, this is what's happening. Like, this is the problem. Like, we have to figure out something that we can do. And really having the councilman's support, and then you being able to garner the support of Councilman Evan Ford and others, helped to build the momentum, where then the Congressman Cohen, who came with you at that rally, really started to participate more. Mayor Lee Harris was at that rally, started to participate more, and really the clarion call that came from Boxtown Neighborhood Association and Westwood Neighborhood Associations.
Justin, who were the two young ladies that were very instrumental in this early process? I mean, they were excellent spokeswomen, and I think really convinced a lot of people of the justice issue involved here.
Oh, without a doubt. The MCAP, which is our organization, was Memphis Community Against the Pipeline, would not have existed without Kathy Robinson and Kizzy Jones. And a quick story, don't want to be too long-winded. My dad is a preacher and it can happen, so catch me.
Well, that's why I invited you, so I wouldn't have to talk as much. So we're all good.
Fair enough. But Kathy Robinson is fourth generation Southwest Memphian. This is how I know folks are resilient. She actually lives in Nashville, but learned about the pipeline from reading one of the daily papers in Memphis, and started to follow the company on Twitter and trying to track like what was happening and what was going. They followed her back on Twitter, right? They followed no one else in the entire country but her. And so she started to get a little concerned and shared that on Facebook. And other people started to build awareness about what was going on. And her best friend, actually, Kizzy Jones, learned about it. And they met together for maybe 4 hours. This is way before I even knew there was anything.
Right.
And they were like, okay, we've got to do something. Let's learn. Let's gather some information. And so Kathy really reached out to the neighborhood associations and Representative Barbara Cooper and Senator Ramesh Akbari, who actually organized the meeting in October. That is where I learned the most information. But Kathy was sort of spearheading a lot of this and helping to galvanize the community. And then when we learned more on October 17, 2020, it was like, oh no, we have to stop this. Right, we've got enough problems in Southwest Memphis. We got enough issues in Memphis. We don't need to add to it or add to the risk. And Kathy and Kizzy attending meetings, organizing meetings, helping to put boots on the ground, knocking on doors, handing out leaflets. Right, it's a really grassroots effort to inform, educate, and activate people. And
what I really appreciated when I came down there was how you had actually made the meeting COVID safe.
Yeah.
Okay. How people were spaced out. People had masks. There was hand sanitizer. I mean, this was early on, in the situation. So, I mean, people were able to come to these rallies and feel secure they weren't going to be getting COVID or passing it on. So that was, just the doctor part of me. Let me know I was with people who cared about other people.
That's right. And the disproportionate impact of the virus, right, on lower wealth people, the disproportionate impact on folks with comorbidities who are overwhelmingly Black, Indigenous, people of color. And so while we're fighting this really big fight, we're realizing we're not living in normal times. These are actually still, in many cases, pretty scary times. And while having to fight billion-dollar corporations, we're also fighting this virus and making sure that we're still doing the hard yet important work of what I would say is a testament to civic engagement on a level I've been really fortunate to be a part of. But yeah, we wanted to make sure people felt safe in order that they could get the information that they needed. And even at that rally, right, people could dial in. We were
Right.
really serious. Like we want people to be safe. We wanted people to be spaced out. We wanted people to feel like they were in community without having to risk their lives and their health for it. Because again, when you're fighting for water, when you're fighting for land, right, you're fighting for life in real senses of the word. Kathy and Kizzy were really helpful in building the momentum and pushing us forward with that too.
Another person, we had two other lawyers that were very helpful. Scott Crosby with Birch Porter, volunteered time and tell the community about exactly how they came in. But there was an eminent domain question about whether this company even had the right to tell people they had eminent domain, and that was going up in front of the judge. And how did that end up? What did Scott end up doing for us?
Yeah, that's an amazing point. For folks who don't know, eminent domain is the right of typically a public utility to take land for the public use. And so Councilman Warren, the city council, if they were building sidewalks in a particular neighborhood and someone refused to sell their land in order to build a sidewalk, which we know would be a benefit to people with strollers or people with disabilities, right? They could use eminent domain and go into those court proceedings to take the land for public use. A private billion-dollar crude oil pipeline was trying to use that same power against really Scotty Fitzgerald, Clyde Robinson, and a lot of other landowners here in Memphis. And we have a wonderful law firm that are actually MCAP's attorneys at the Southern Environmental Law Center, extraordinary group of human beings who helped us to find landowners who'd been sued. And Dr. Ryan, you know this, we would learn where they lived and go knock on the door. I was knocking on doors in the rain, saying, hey, I heard that you've been sued. And Kathy, Kizzy, they would go on Facebook trying to look for people, right? Saying, hey, we've heard you've been sued. And there were some people who didn't know that this was happening. There were other folks who said, I don't know what to do with the paperwork. Other people said, I don't have an attorney, right? Like, so how are you going to?
A lot of people sort of signed because they were thinking they had no choice in the matter.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. A lot of people signed saying they had no choice in the matter because the company was saying Tennessee law says we have the right of eminent domain. And so if you don't give it to us, we're going to take it. We're going to take you to court. And if you don't have an attorney, you don't have a lot of money, what are you supposed to do, right? That's putting people in a very difficult situation and exploiting them. Let's be honest about what was happening. It was exploiting them with lack of information, and it was exploiting them knowing that our community wouldn't have as many resources typically as a wealthier community likely would.
A 60, 70-year-old person who's been living in their home their entire life, they get this paper that says, I'm going to take your home.
Right.
You got to come to court. And they're just hoping, well, I'm scared to go to court. What else are they going to take? So, a lot of people are scared to go.
A lot of people were scared to go, and they say, well, if you just sign, you get a minimal fee, right? Like you get some money, and it's going to be okay. But as we learn, when you get into those documents, it's a whole lot left there. If an incident happens, well, it's the owners of the property's responsibility, not the pipeline companies. If we abandon this project, it's the owner's responsibility, it's not ours. It was a lot of things inside of there.
That was the catcher for me, man. You're going to put this pipeline in the ground. You're going to use it for 50 years. And then the person who you paid $3,000 for their land has got to pay the excavation costs and the cleanup costs of a pipeline left in the ground. It's crazy.
And if it stays there, right, it becomes a hazard. And so nothing can ever be built there. It was a terrible deal that, again, it was exploiting Memphians, and they were using law that was obviously in the wrong way to take folks' property and take folks' land. And so to your point, so we had SELC, George Nolan, Amanda Garcia, who runs the Tennessee office, and they're with us. They're saying, all right, MCAP, Protect Our Aquifer, Tennessee Sierra Club. We know there's a fight happening. We want to support. We want to help. And I have to say, they're some of the best attorneys and human beings I've had the chance to meet. And, we met Mr. Clyde Robinson and his daughter, Marie Odom, who you know well. And I said, we're going to get you a lawyer, right, for your next court date in January. And the January rally where you and Congressman Cohen and Mayor Lee Harris attended, it was a rally for landowners. And George Nolan, he said, we're going to work to find someone. And he called one of his colleagues from the University of Virginia, Scott Crosby, who's a senior attorney at Birch Porter and Johnson, which is an extraordinary law firm. And Scott obviously is a remarkable human being because Scott says, I'm in. He says, I'm going to take on the cases of anyone who does not want to sell their land. And our primary client, the primary clients became Mr. Clyde Robinson, who's an 80-year-old Black gentleman who said of them taking his land, it feels like slavery times. And Mrs. Scotty Fitzgerald, who's 68-year-old, wonderful, beautiful voice of a Black woman whose mom purchased the land in the 1940s. And they became the main clients for Birch Porter and Johnson against these eminent domain cases. And what we learned in that January, he stood up and said, Tennessee law does not allow for a private company to take private land for their own private benefit. And we are still Southerners. And folks really don't like the idea that a private company could come and take their land. And so when Tennessee had the opportunity to strengthen its eminent domain laws after what's known in the Supreme Court Kelo decision, they did. And crude oil pipeline companies were not included. And so we've now had, we've got an education in eminent domain. And we know what companies do not have it. And we were able, through Judge Felicia Corbin Johnson, over, 4, 5, 6 months of hearings after hearings, to have 30, 40, 50, 60 people in the community show up to court virtually. That was the blessing of Zoom, and hear what was happening as those cases proceeded. And although we didn't get to the summary judgment, the pipeline company canceled before that summary judgment was going to be rendered. We were able to ensure that Mr. Robinson and Ms. Fitzgerald's land was safe. They were non-suited. The company agreed not to sue them again, and that if they were ever to sue, it would be with prejudice, meaning they would have to operate as though they don't have the power of eminent domain, which is a good sign for us, that they knew what was going to happen with that summary judgment. And MCAP, after they non-suited Mr. Robinson and Ms. Fitzgerald, we actually sued the pipeline and said, this issue is bigger than just two landowners. All 600,000 of us need to know if tomorrow somebody can knock on your door and say, we want your property. And
so where is that suit? Is that still in progress now?
No, so that suit is no longer in progress. So in essence, we won our case in that they canceled the project, and then in sort of the agreement to non-suit and to end the case, they gave back their permits, nationwide permit 12, that was rescinded back to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer, as well as a permit they got from Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation was rescinded, and then the property was given back to those two landowners. And what we are still working on is to get the land of every Memphian back into those landowners' hands. We don't want Byhalia and Plains and Valero still owning land in Memphis, and so we are working on that.
Okay, that's excellent.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good example of what happens when you get good people together trying to fight for an idea that's just and right. And speaking of, people who are fighting, we had, this was crazy to me. We had Vice President Gore come and speak. All of the celebrities and political figures that were behind this. Lee Harris was there. He spoke for it. Congressman Cohen spoke for us. I got to speak. I felt really proud to be with those august people. And but go through the list. Who else? We had movie stars, right? Who were they?
From Danny Glover to Justin Timberlake to Jane Fonda. We had so many people around the country and really the world who joined in our movement and fight for justice. And what I think is really important about this fight that really can't be lost is what's known as like choosing a social location with people who are more marginalized, right? Like, here's the truth of the matter: you don't live in Southwest Memphis, Dr. Warren, right? Like,
no.
You don't live in Boxtown, you don't live in Westwood, but you had the willingness to say, I understand that if we serve people in Memphis, any group of people who are being potentially oppressed or suffering the most, that all of us can benefit. And that idea, right, that if we serve folks who have been most excluded, all of us benefit. It started out with just Boxtown Neighborhood Association and West Junction Neighborhood Association and Westwood, but other folks from different parts of the city, from some of the suburbs, started to show up too and say, no, we're going to do in a Christian tradition, we're going to do for the last, the lost, the least, the left out. We're going to do for that community, because when we work for the people who are most excluded, actually all of us will benefit. And so the clarion call that started right down in Boxtown started to be heard and echoed and reverberated all across the country to the ears of former Vice President Gore, who even talked about the Byhalia pipeline to President Biden. Right, like that is the power of what happens when we do and build what author Heather McGhee, she calls the solidarity dividend. You and I look very different in a essential way in America, which is being different races of people, right? Like when that starts to happen.
I thought you were talking about my gray hair.
Gray hair too. You're working on your afro, I see, though. You're growing it out. It looks good. Being seeing people of different races, seeing people of different socioeconomic statuses, working and collaborating toward justice, right? Good people who say we're going to do something. We don't have to just sit back and accept that we've lost. We don't have to sit back and accept what they called us, the path of least resistance.
It definitely was not a given that we were going to be able, for a very long time, particularly at the beginning, it looked like we had a very uphill battle, and it wasn't a given that we were going to win this thing.
That's right.
And the social dividend, I think, this was going on also around the time that we're dealing with the social justice issues with, Mr. Floyd's death in Minneapolis, and all the other issues that brought out in the country. So, the Black Lives Matter movement had a lot to do with this too. So people who were wanting to see social justice were able to see the social justice aspect of putting this pipeline through this area. And interestingly, I had no idea that Native Americans own land in that area, that it was going to cross Native American land. I didn't realize that's where a lot of the Native Americans after the Civil War settled. I learned a lot about Memphis history by getting involved in this.
Right. By getting, as Brian Stevens said, getting proximate. When we get proximate, we see things that we otherwise wouldn't see. We learn things we otherwise would not learn, right? But it wasn't just from a distance, right? And if you just stay in the ivory tower of a university or in City Hall and you never go meet folks, and you were literally in Alonzo Weaver Park, the people, right? You saw the folks, you're able to learn the history and the stories that people carry within themselves that show you how resilient people are and how much history folks carry within themselves. But you've illuminated a really essential point that I want to continue to emphasize. Had we not been in a moment reckoning with racism and reckoning with the inequalities of our society post the lynchings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, I do not think this would have gotten as much attention as it garnered. As people were starting to witness the intersections, right? You got the pandemic, and you know this well as a doctor, you have the pandemic disproportionately impacting people, and it literally, the virus takes your breath away, right?
Right.
It takes your breath away. And you have millions of people across the globe marching with the phrase like, I can't breathe, and we can't breathe. And you have the understanding coming into our consciousness about toxins in the air and how much more crude oil would increase the amount of toxins that are going through some of the refineries, whether that be in Memphis or St. James. And knowing that we have more COPD, we have more asthma, we have more issues related to lung-related issues than most communities. And then you have this pipeline added on top of that. And folks are in a moment where the consciousness has been raised and the willingness and desire to do something is there. And those two moments, those two things, I think, really did meet each other across the spectrum. And so you got people who were marching who might not otherwise been marching, right? People at rallies who might not otherwise be at rallies, because this moment in American history is a very different one than it would have been otherwise.
One other key player, I think, or a couple of key players that I think helped us And it was that we brought science here. Just much like we were using science to fight COVID, we were using science about what potential problems could occur if we did have a major spill. So we have the Cesar group from the University of Memphis that have been studying the aquifer and how water gets into the aquifer from Memphis, where there may be potential problems and contaminants that we're still going to have to deal with. And we're going to be coming, that's still coming up. Those guys were there. And then we had the Save Our Aquifer group. We're sort of more of a political group involved too. So I just think the number of people that came together for this was the synergy you're talking about.
Yeah, and it created the necessary solidarity, and it put power in places that have been disempowered. Like that's the recipe for success for our society. If we want to create social change, if we want social justice or environmental justice to be real, let's go find the places that have been disempowered for 60, 70, 80, 100, 400 years. And then let's put the science and the resources of people like Caesar, like you're talking about, or Protect Our Aquifer, who have people literally on the board who manage an aquifer, right? The Edwards Aquifer and other places who have a sense of this. Let's put that information in places that have been disempowered. And now you got Protect Our Aquifer signs in Westwood and in Boxtown, right? Not just in Midtown and other places in our city. But you're exactly right that information got to places that it may not have otherwise gotten. And then let's be honest, SELC and Birch Porter and Johnson, those are big law firms. Birch Porter and Johnson represented Dr. King and the civil rights workers, the sanitation workers strike. And so you had a lot of resources and like multi-million-dollar law firms, if they were private, fighting on behalf of the Memphis community.
And we could not have succeeded without the pro bono work from both of those law firms, getting us in a position where we could protect the landowners and where we could get our message out and not be railroaded. I mean, I remember at the beginning of this, there was a time crunch. We were worried that what would occur, and this is another key point that I didn't bring up, but I think the citizens need to realize the pipeline needed permits from the city to be able to move forward. And once we understood that, because we had to do the research to find that out, I took that information to Mayor Strickland. And Mayor Strickland said, Jeff, we're not going to issue any permits until we figure out what's going on with this. And it doesn't sound to me like we need to issue them at all. But you guys move ahead forward and realize that I will buy you time. And what he did was he bought us enough time to we won the day.
Yep, that is exactly right. Cannot underestimate that.
I mean, that was huge.
That changed the trajectory completely.
And he did not take any credit for that.
That's right.
I mean, most people don't realize that he was that instrumental in giving us the time that we needed to be able to get through and succeed here.
That is exactly right.
I hope he's not mad at me for telling this, but he definitely was instrumental in helping us out.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's always a race against the clock, and he gave us time that we didn't know we would be able to have. It was a united effort across the city, across the county, in a way that hopefully is replicated for more justice work into the future.
Now, as we're talking about racing against the clock, we're getting our warning signs that we've got about a minute left to close this up. So we'll just keep going. But I'm trying to think, is there anyone else in that first group that we have failed to mention that was key? Who else was there?
One that's really important for MCAP.
Councilman Ford. I think he really stepped up to the plate for us, right?
He definitely did, saying, I don't want to be the next Flint, Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
And as MCAP was growing, Breach Collective, which is a group, people won't believe this, but across the country out of Portland, Oregon, helped us to build our entire sort of infrastructure as we were getting off the ground. And they also are environmental attorneys. We probably had a dozen attorneys, but also campaign organizers, so that we could learn how do you inform people and educate people and activate people. And Breach Collective, they're still working with us now as we continue to push this momentum that we built and this knowledge that we built forward. And so definitely,
let's sort of get ready to close there. And let's take this to the next thing we're looking at about protecting the aquifer, which has to do with coal ash that's sitting on President's Island, and how that particular coal ash is a risk to the aquifer as we move forward.
That sounds good. And also,
all right,
the legislation we got going.
All right. Well, I think that's about our minute. So we're just going to close here, and we'll come back for our last 28 minutes after this. And thanks for being with me, Justin.
Thank you so much for having me.
When a child in your life requires intensive care, their health fragile, their condition complex, certified acute care pediatric and neonatal nurse practitioners will give you the information and support you need to make the best decisions for your child, while providing the critical care your child needs. With advanced specialized education, these nurse practitioners are trained to diagnose and manage serious life-threatening conditions and complex emergencies. They're dedicated to caring for the sickest infants and children. They are trained to make a difference. When life hands you its worst, certified acute care pediatric and neonatal nurse practitioners are at their best. Trained to be different. Critically ill children benefit from their knowledge. Learn why at certifiednurses.org.
Welcome back to Neighbor Talk. I'm Dr. Jeff Warren, City Councilman, Super District 9-3, here with my good friend Justin J. Pearson with the Pipeline Advocacy Group, Memphis against, what's the acronym, Justin? Help me out here.
Memphis Community Against the Pipeline, MCAP.
MCAP. Okay, good. I'm just horrible with acronyms and names, but
you're a doctor. You use the real long words.
It's right. And then I butcher them. I get that from my mom. She was really good at making. I think we had Parmesan cheese when I grew up in my house. Last when we were talking last, we sort of finished up a little bit with the pipeline, and we talked about all the different players that had helped, but I think it's really important to realize that, that district was in South Memphis. And in that South Memphis district, that was Councilman Edmund Ford Sr., who was behind the scenes helping us as we moved these ordinances through. And right now, we've passed one ordinance with the help of our attorney, Alan Wade, that we think is pretty ironclad, that protects the well heads, which are the areas that we do the pumping from. And that gives us protection in about 20% of the land mass of Shelby County. And the county commission, following Mayor Harris's lead, has passed a county setback ordinance that sort of provides 1,500 feet from hospitals and schools and daycares and churches to protect them from spills. So that's given the county a lot of relief. We have a similar bill, a 1,500-foot setback, that's due for a vote this next council meeting. So Tuesday week is when we'll be voting on this. And we have another ordinance that our counselor, Alan Wade, has written and sort of modified with the help of the Southern Environmental Law Firm suggestions that provide protection based on the city's right to govern right away across our streets and other property. So we'll have, if all of these go through, we'll have 3 good ordinances in the city and 1 good ordinance in the county that'll be providing relief from high-pressure oil pipelines or other potentially dangerous things that we need to be able to have some say about where they go and how they're built. So that's where that's the things that are coming up. What did I miss, Justin? Anything you can think of?
I think that's a fantastic sort of summarization of the legislative and the political work that's has been happening and that is going to happen. And just a couple of things I doubled down on is Councilman Edmund Ford Sr. has been a big help in elevating this issue. You remember very early on when this was brought before the city council, he spoke in front of Plains All-American, in front of the entire community and said, look, my district is predominantly Black, and I don't want my district to be treated just like Flint was treated. And we know what happened with the Flint water crisis. They were thought to be the path of least resistance. They were exploited, and the residents there suffered with diseases and with illnesses that are going on until today. And so his voice really boomed across not just the council chambers and what we saw in video, but to the minds and to the hearts of people in the city. And throughout, from then until now, he's stayed abreast of the issue and has been an advocate for the community, knowing that, you know, the issue that happened in South Memphis and the fights that are happening in South Memphis wouldn't happen in other parts of the city. And we know that. And we know it because we know the history of race, we know the history of wealth, and how that intersects with justice and injustice. And so just many thanks to Councilman Edmund Ford Sr. for really, you know, getting on the council, getting on the camera and telling the truth about what was at stake. And it really helped to buoy a lot of people who were fighting because, you know, like you said, we had the science and all this stuff that was saying that, but we needed more voices of people like yourself, people like Councilman Ford Sr.
But when he gets going, man, he can get a room riled.
Oh yeah,
he has the ability to get his point across well.
Definitely.
And I think he helped us dramatically as we move forward with this. The other thing that I want to take a little bit of time on and talk about is the coal ash that is now present on President Island that is a result of us using that Allen steam plant for coal and providing electricity to our area for decades.
Right.
And, you know, the first time I ever heard of coal ash was when there was some spill in Middle Tennessee. And it looked like some big pond had just spread all this black stuff, you know, all over the ground. And I thought, well, that's a mess. I had no idea how toxic it was.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the people who worked on that are dead now, cleaning it up because I don't think they knew how toxic it was. So we've learned a lot about this. And when the council and the city and the county and TVA got together and developed a plan to try to remove this coal ash, I don't think anybody was really thinking to the degree that we are today about the aquifer and the need to protect that for future generations. You know, we just had always assumed we were going to have clean water. No one really thought that we could really mess this up if we weren't paying attention. And now we know that. And now we've got a plan to remove that, the coal ash. TVA's brought a plan and waiting on a final deposition or authorization from the state to move it forward. And, you know, some of us are wondering, is this the best plan? What else can we do? Do we really want to move this from one poor African-American community to another one in Capeville? And I can tell you, I've done some investigation on it, but at the face value, this doesn't seem like it's the best long-term plan. It may be a good plan to get started so we can start moving this coal ash and getting it away from where it's seeping down into our aquifer as we speak. But it may not be where we want the vast majority of it to end up if we can get an alternative now that we know that we don't really want to keep this on top of the aquifer forever. Justin, are you aware of what this plant is, Republic plant in Capable? Have you been to any of those lectures that they've given as public meetings? So maybe you can describe or give your opinion about what you know about the landfill that it's going to be going into, and then I'll fill in with what I learned when I talked to TDEC, Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation.
Well, thank you so much. And I think this is definitely going to be the next largest issue for our city and our county to be addressing. But right before I add just a couple of thoughts there, when thinking about some of the major players, I was thinking about Councilman Edmund Ford and thinking about the Shelby County Commission, who in a very big way stopped the sale of land to Byhalia Pipeline when they were trying to build that across the aquifer and through South Memphis. And that was led by Commissioner Tammy Sawyer, and also just a citizen, Ayanna Hampton. She's the one who found out they were trying to sell the land, right? We didn't find it out. Our commissioners didn't find it out. It was another person who was paying attention who said, hey, you all should pay attention to this. Told Commissioner Sawyer, and we were meeting with her the next day by chance. We're just meeting with her the next day. And she said, you all should probably pay attention to this. And the commissioners overwhelmingly agreed, like, we definitely do not want to sell land to them. And so
now, was that Edmund Ford Jr.'s committee that blocked that on the county commission? So we had the dad and the son both working with us on this, right?
That's right. And so we had the big vote came to the large council.
Right.
And so what we were really advocating for, it actually passed in committee, the sale, to be voted on that Monday. We didn't learn about it till that Thursday. And so once we learned about it that Thursday, we started sending emails and phone calls. I think they said there were about 4,000 emails sent over the course of 4 days about not selling the land to the pipeline company. And so we're seeing people power work. We're seeing elected leaders hearing the advocacy of people to create and to make just decisions. And like that's the best thing I could possibly imagine. And it was it turned what was supposed to be
a citizen that let us know. I mean, I sort of feel the same way about it. Was your email to me that let me know. I had no idea, and I was on the council. This was something completely underneath the radar. And I think it's a good example of how democracy is supposed to work. This is how we're supposed to govern people and how we're supposed to serve as elected officials.
So, and again, and I am doing this often because it's important, and thanking you and helping to bring that transparency forward. Because like you say, it was supposed to be opaque. The pipeline company wanted it to be opaque, right? They didn't want anybody asking questions. They didn't want to go before city council. They didn't want to go before the Memphis community and talk about the potential dangers of this project. And so by having leaders in positions of power, as you are, feeling empowered by thousands of citizens to really be our voice and help to advocate for our aquifer and help to advocate for our vulnerable communities, we're able to see more just things happen that might not have otherwise happened. And when thinking about this issue, this toxic coal ash issue down in Southwest Memphis, it's important to remember sort of two things. One deals with transparency, but the first is the pipeline battle did not create environmental racism, right? It did not create environmental injustice. And you and I and a lot of folks in our coalition understand that from the Poor People's Campaign with Dr. Barber and Pastor Gordon through to Protect Our Aquifer. We get it now in a way that we might not have otherwise have done. But the fact that the coal was burned in Southwest Memphis for 60 to 70 years, right? Like that went into people's lungs, right? Those particulates were in that community and in our community for decades upon decades while my parents were growing up all those years.
Well, that's the increase in the cancer and the lung disease that you're talking about. There are reasons for that.
There are reasons for that. It's not haphazard, right? And I think that is one of the lessons about the information and the education in the struggle that's so important for our community in Memphis and people across the country to realize that we didn't just wake up to this point, right? We didn't just wake up to where billion-dollar companies are calling places paths of least resistance. They're looking at a history and a legacy that has treated people in a way that disempowered them. And so there was that coal plant, which was closed relatively recently in about 2018. And now there's a combined gas plant there in South Memphis. And I got to do more research about natural gas projects. But what was left was the residue of 60, 70 years of toxic coal ash, which to our most recent calculations is 3 million cubic yards of coal ash.
So what does that mean if you're trying to give someone an idea, like how many football fields stacked, a mile high?
Yeah.
And I think we need to come up with that sort of.
We definitely do, because it's at least as long as a football field. I've seen it and seen the ponds, and it's at least as long as a football field. But I
and
can't
there's more
tell
than
you-
one, right?
There's more than one. There are two
Yeah,
on the east and the
yeah.
west side. There are two of these ponds, and it doesn't look good, right?
And the thing is, the place where we're moving this to start off with, where it's probably going to be started and moved to,
Mhm.
is a landfill that's been specifically designed, and actually the design was overseen by TDEC. So they had an initial design. TDEC said, no, you got to do this, you got to do that. They added these criteria to try to make it safer. They've also added something to where they've got to measure radon that comes out of the ground from this stuff to make sure that if there's any problems with that, it's abated. So and most people don't realize that radon naturally comes out of ground at other places. And if you build your house on some place that's emitting radon, it increases your risk of lung cancer just from breathing the air in your house where it's contained. So not only do we have to keep the toxins and the heavy metals, and it's really the heavy metal issue that's in this coal ash that's the toxicity. I learned talking to TDEC recently. So they've designed this particular landfill with very special, very thick plastic liners that are designed to last for 400 years. And they're also designed to weather an earthquake. Mm-hmm. So they've looked at the earthquake capabilities. They've looked at, the length of time that this will last. And my complaint to them, and I think what we need to think about for environmental justice here is, that's well and good. I'm glad they built this thing. It's still on top of the aquifer. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we know we need to be moving the stuff that's on President's Island now because it's seeping down. Right. We're still going to have to remediate that. Right. So the quicker we start moving it, the quicker we get it off of there. But can we move it someplace else once we get that built and developed? Mm-hmm. And I think that may be the compromise that we're going to need to fight for.
Right, and there's a really key point here that we can't miss based on our previous conversation about the opacity of our previous fight. We didn't learn about TVA's decision of choosing South Shelby landfill until a meeting that they went actually before you and the city council and just announced it.
Right.
And so obviously the council was not happy about it. But neither were anyone I talked with in the community didn't know that this had been selected. And so all the information that you just shared, that we're continuing, so much new stuff almost every day. I was listening to Mark Yates yesterday, so much new information that we're learning kind of after the fact.
And what's interesting, they've been in this process for 5 years. So, I mean, this has been planned for 5 years. So it's sort of one of these conundrums of governmental projects that take a long time to get through all these regulatory, systems and agencies and oversight to make sure it's going to be done right. Well, by the time it gets to where you have your input, it's almost like your input's a little bit too late.
Right.
It's a done deal. And I think that's sort of the frustration that I think citizens are feeling now and local elected officials are feeling, is that really, I mean, and then to give people the benefit of the doubt, I don't think when this was started and for the first 3 years of the project or 4 years, anyone was thinking about 200 or 300 years from now, what happens if that thing fails on the aquifer? Who's going to pay for it? How's it going to get taken care of? Because it's in Memphis. Okay, if it's still in Memphis, Memphis is going to have to pay for it. Right. I think we need to be thinking about how we're going to, this coal ash just didn't give electricity to Memphis. It gave electricity to all the surrounding area. We need to, and to the TVA, we need to make sure that we put it a safer place, not on top of an aquifer.
Right, and I totally agree with you. And again, I appreciate your advocacy in helping to elevate this, because there's the need to think into the future, right? And some folks don't always want to think what happens 7 generations from now. right? Long after we're no longer here, like what is the problems that we are pushing forward, but also what's the possibilities that we're pushing forward and potentially the hopes that we are. And if we can start to think with that mindset that you're encouraging and that I've been hearing at the city council, which is we can't just look at what's the quick solution now, though we want a solution now too, right? We have to think long term, what are the ramifications of this? Because, okay, in 400 years, the liner is thin and it breaks, right? Because it's only meant to last 400 years. Then what happens, right?
Right.
Coal ash is in Memphis for eternity.
And
right?
then it's heading its way down to the aquifer, and we're going to have to do it all over again. You know,
Exactly.
the Bible says the sins of the father to the 10th generation. Okay. So this is one of those things that we can make the wrong decision. Okay. Because we're not thinking long term. And then that sin of not thinking long term will show up in our progeny.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And so there's a need again for more information about, and I asked for this yesterday, what were the other requests for proposals? What were alternatives that were intentionally considered? You raised, and we always raise, what are the environmental justice concerns? We're moving from Southwest Memphis to another part of South Memphis, predominantly Black, lower wealth areas, right, where landfills and coal ash gets placed. And what I understand is there was only a bounding analysis done by TVA, which is to say this. They said in their paperwork to TDAC, well, no matter what happens, we're going to put this ash in an environmental justice community. And so we don't have to do something specific for South Shelby or specific for Tunica, which was another location. And so doing a bounding analysis.
Tunica mostly a Black county?
It is.
Is it?
It is.
There's a pattern.
There's a pattern. There is a pattern going on here, right? Like there is a pattern, and we've got to start seeing the patterns and not just accepting them. Yeah. And we have to actively do something different. And I think that's, if anything, the momentum that's been built, the knowledge that's been learned about the aquifer, the knowledge that's been learned about environmental justice. It's like we don't have to repeat the same harms that we once accepted when we knew less. When we did not know better, right? You know better, you do better. And like you said, 5 years ago, conversations about the aquifer were not happening like this. Conversations about environmental justice, environmental racism were not happening like this. Now that they are, we've got to be much more intentional about being transparent about decision-making processes, have to be more transparent about what the community knows, what the community does not know, and engaging the people who will be impacted the most. Because those trucks going up and down South Memphis, right? The people who are living in those neighborhoods and going to be seeing them and hearing them, right? Like they deserve to know what's going on and deserve input about why us, right? And what potential, what they call, and I'm learning about this term, environmental reparations happens because of the 60 years of coal ash that was burned into the air, that was breathed into the lungs of our ancestors and our own parents. In fact, my parents were living in Southwest Memphis, right? Like what happens to them? What healthcare is being provided or other things, right? Just like these questions were not being given a chance to ask because the process as happened, a lot happened in the dark, and then it was just pushed into the front, and we were told we have to accept it. And we're not just going to accept it. We're going to ask meaningful and thoughtful questions and follow the leadership of our council, who says we don't want this on our aquifer. We want to know more information, and we as the community do too.
Well, I think that's something that we really need to get out that people know. One of the things I think is important that people know is they learned a lot from that coal ash spill in Middle Tennessee. Yeah. So what they've done is they've gone out of their way, or TDAC has gone out of its way, instructing TVA on how to safely remove that coal ash for the people who are doing the removal. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, literally, these trucks are going to be hermetically sealed, have their own air supply. So people in the trucks, as it's being loaded, et cetera, we're not going to have the stuff floating in the air. There'll be people measuring the air around the trucks. I think they'll probably be hosing the trucks down back into the coal ash slurry area, just to keep the amount of particulate matter as it's transferred down. Initially I thought the safest way to do this would be to put it on a barge and move it on a barge down to Texas off of the aquifer and then put it in a similar quality landfill there. But I talked with TDEC, and essentially they looked at that, and the way you deal with this most safely is you handle it the fewest times possible. And by putting it in a truck and putting it in a landfill, you've handled it twice. Whereas if you're going to put it on a barge, you got to put it in a truck, load it on a barge, move it down the river, put it in a truck, load it in a landfill. So you've got 4 or 5 touches, and every time you have a touch, there may be a potential for increased toxicity in the environment where the people are. So, and I was worried too, also, if we're trucking this stuff, what's that going to do to the air? What's it going to do to the roads? Mm-hmm. Based on the amount of trucks that we have driving through Memphis on a daily basis, this is going to be a pittance. I think they're talking about 10, 20 trucks a day. So it won't be like a huge amount of truck as far as air pollution is concerned and other things. It's just that I still think we need to figure out how do we get it to where it's trucked a little bit further and we pay a little bit more for gas, because this is a cost thing. Okay. Sometimes the environmental justice issue becomes an environmental justice issue because that's the cheapest thing you can do. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's the land's cheapest there. The people who are there are the path of least resistance. Mm-hmm. And we're going to put it down there. And I think this may be a case where it's not a least resistance path either.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say a few things because I know we want to wrap and definitely give
I'll let you wrap it up. Okay.
I think we want to remember one of the key lessons, which we want to get to the people who are going to be most proximate to the problem and hear what they're saying and listen to those opinions and those voices too. I'm thankful to TDEC, right? Them elevating this issue of the fact that there is toxins getting to the shallow aquifer, which we know has a interaction with the Memphis sand aquifer, and saying, TVA, you're going to have to do something, right? So super grateful, Dr. Atkins, Commissioner Sawyers, and folks who are realizing, look, we need to act because we want action as well. I think the piece that's most important, and you're sharing really good information from the meeting that you held, which I know you held at the City Council, and so thank you for doing that. Again, bring information to the public light. Is we're going to need more information so we can inform, educate, activate our community, and determine what our advocacy really is going to be. Memphis Community Against Pollution, our new name, MCAP, hasn't taken a firm stance yet on this particular issue, but we do know we want it to be a just solution that protects our aquifer and protects our communities. And really just grateful to you for being a champion of environmental justice and a champion of protecting the aquifer.
Well, I'm grateful to you for having the same acronym for your new organization, MCAP. So now maybe I can remember.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. You got it forever. MCAP and POA, protect our aquifer. And, you know, Memphis is a really strong place. And Dr. King, right before he came here, before he was assassinated, he told his team, the movement lives or dies in Memphis. And whether it's Climate Reality Project, the Poor People's Campaign, Breach Collective, SCLC, Birch Porter Johnson, the City Council, MCAP, the County Commission, the mayors, the movement can live here if we choose to do the work of justice. And I just feel so inspired and grateful that I was able to be home. I know it was a global pandemic and we lost a lot of people on this journey, but I'm really fortunate to be home and in the fight for justice with you and as a city.
Well, listen, thank you again for being with us. And thank you, Library Channel, for having us. Hopefully we'll be back soon. Take care now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.